Welcome everyone.
Hi. Looby and I, we live really close to each other, so we thought, why not? Let's sit together.
In person. Hey, no Zoom, we're in a whole room together.
And we're close to each other with no masks, we're just together. It's really, really lovely. So my name's Ruth, I'm Ruth Cato, and I am a shamanic practitioner. I work with the spirits and the nature of the land that I walk upon. And right now, and for most of my life, that has been this land, the Middle Lands of England, right on the Welsh border. And I work mostly with women and with women's circles, holding space for transformation, for shifts and change, and healing for both women and for the earth.
Beautiful, and I've had the pleasure of sitting in many of Ruth's circles. I am a permaculture facilitator and designer and author, and I've authored the book Cultural Emergence and People Permaculture, and some other books as well actually. But this is part of the Encouraging Conversations series that I'm doing because I'm in the process of manifesting the Cultural Emergence card deck. So I brought these cards along here to Ruth, and we're going to explore some of the similarities that we thought of with our work, of like, well, what is it that we do? So something that on the surface might seem very different, but actually we realise that there's four main themes that are similar to what we both do, which is about encouragement, transformation, manifestation, and community. Yeah. And it was like, oh yeah, that's those four words really encapsulate.
Because Looby came with these words, and I was like, well, yeah, that's it, isn't it? That is what both of us do.
Yeah. So let's start with encouragement, because like, how do you give and receive encouragement? It's a two-way process, isn't it? And we need to be open to receiving it, to become leaderful, and you've certainly become leaderful in your life, and I have in mine, and so that's because we've absorbed it, encouragement, hasn't it?
Well, Looby's a big part of that for me. So Looby's encouragement to me and support, and just feeling like I've been seen by her and my work's been received by Looby. That's been a massive part of Looby's encouragement, or how I felt Looby's encouragement to me. In my work, I feel like certainly over the last few years, encouragement has been a big part of what I've been doing with women. The women that I've been working with a lot have very much been at a point in their, I would say, spiritual journeys where they need to hear and need to know and need to practice that they're not bonkers, and that their intuition and these practices that maybe they feel and enjoy themselves are appreciated and honoured by other people as well. So I think what I've been doing a lot of over the last few years especially, and I still do now, is really create space for people to come and share and hear and learn about the intuitive spaces that, and really be encouraged in that to, you know, this isn't bonkers, this is really true, and this is something that has been really shoved out and disregarded and dishonoured by a very patriarchal system that wants us to be very linear and rational all the time. So a lot of my encouragement work really over the last few years especially has been about that, about creating space for us to be heard in those spaces, in those ways. How about you? What's your encouragement?
Oh, I think it is part of that recognising that we've all got something to give, and that when we tap into that and allow ourselves to offer it out into the world and to receive that encouragement that it is valued, that it is appreciated, that it is needed, and that we all have something to give, that's like massively encouraging. And that if we can do that for each other, have these conversations where it's like, well, what is it, Ruth, that you want to do? What is it that you can do? What are those little small steps that take us on our journey. So overall, like moving into that transformation, it can seem quite subtle to start with, and I was thinking of it on the way over, of that subtle transformation can seem like, you know, when you go into your wardrobe and you suddenly realise there's been an item of clothing that you haven't worn for a while, and you're like, oh, I used to wear that all the time, but I don't anymore. And it can be like that with our beliefs or our thoughts, can't it? That we suddenly think, oh, I've not been thinking that, or I've not had that. And so there can be quite subtle transformations, but then in this process you were talking about this non-linear, moving away from that. Actually, sometimes the transformation can be this kind of complete, like, woof, uphill, and, you know, like...
And that's such a perfect example of how it works with shamanic healing work. And I'd love to hear about maybe some practical ways that you do that encouragement and do those things as well, if you want to. But it just really rung bells for me of, well, that's exactly what I say with shamanic healing, is after you've done a session, after you've done some work, is go out and look for the change. Because just like with a piece of clothing, if you haven't worn it for a while, maybe you forget about it. And and I think that's partly why I love this work, is because the change, the transformation is so clear and so obvious that you don't remember what it was like to not be leaderful or to not be confident in that thing. It just fades away. So you actually have to actively look for it. Go, oh, that, I used to wear that. I used to think like that. I don't do that anymore. That's massive, isn't it? Such a clear change.
And then through that transformation and those kind of letting goes of old beliefs, I think that's been a massive part of my journey, and how I encourage others is that challenging them. So, like, do you really believe that? Are there exceptions? What are those limiting beliefs that you've got that maybe aren't true? And just to open yourselves up to those questioning, and to gently challenge each other when we maybe say something that I can't think of an example of, like, oh, I can't draw or something, or I can't sing, and it's like, oh, but actually weren't you singing the other day with us all, or weren't you know, just to sort of gently challenge. And I find that those gentle challenges can be encouraging, and that they can lead to transformation. And then that all lays the foundations then for manifestation, which is the next part of it, isn't it? Of how to recognise what it is that we want in the world, and to say, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to this coming true and manifesting. And it seems, you know, that kind of airy-fairy on manifestation, but actually it's a really grounded process. Yeah. Gardening is manifestation, cooking is manifestation, so we're all the time doing that. Yeah, I wonder, do you have some tips for people about how to manifest? Because I know you're a big manifester like I am.
I think that's another thing, isn't it, that's really similar with our work, is that, well, certainly for me, you might think that in the world of shamanic practice that it could be quite airy-fairy, using that language, you know. And actually what I do is similar to Looby, in that it's all incredibly grounded and incredibly real. So whereas manifestation, you know, could be seen as something, I'm dreaming this, I'm wishing this, I'm imagining it, I'm visualizing it, and then it's just going to happen. But Looby in particular is somebody that's really inspired me to, but also my own work as well, to go, okay, so we dream the dream, we welcome the dream, and then there's the whole process of the rest of the cycle of, where do I need action, and where do I refine things, and where do you celebrate bits, and
yeah,
it's really real.
What's limiting us? What are those beliefs that we maybe need to, you know, those old clothes, as it were, that we need to get out and go, do we really want this? No. And to recognise what it is that's stopping that process of manifestation. And that's part of something that people sometimes feel afraid of, or see that maybe it's somehow denying the process. and sowing doubt but actually it's surfacing it that allows it to transform and say, okay, actually that is my for example, okay, my lack of practical skills might be limiting my belief and my process of manifesting a piece of land. And so then you can, but you maybe think, oh, I don't want to admit that because I just want to manifest the piece of land. But by admitting it and saying it is a limit, then you can say, okay, actually, therefore I need to increase my practical skills. Now I know that that's what I want to do. I can find opportunities to volunteer or go on a course or do my own woodwork, or how can I increase those skills so it's no longer a limit. So it actually, by surfacing it, which is a lot of what you do as well, going under the surface and pulling them up, then we can move forward with it and that process of manifestation.
And I think also by voicing things, you're releasing the tension around them.
Yeah.
If you think, oh, there's this thing that's stopping me from manifesting this big dream, and I'm going to keep a lid on that because that's going to stop me from manifesting my dream, you're just going to squeeze it and you're going to push it down. And we've had conversations about shadow work a lot before, haven't we? And it's just, you turn things into shadow when you push it back. You need to bring air to it and let things breathe, and sometimes just voicing it either to yourself or to other people will actually release the tension of that. So then actually it's not in your way anymore.
Yeah.
So there's the practical and the physical that you can do and maybe should do in many situations, and also just voicing things is really, really shifting and helpful.
Now I have this definition of culture, because cultural emergence, we're trying to shift culture personally, our own personal culture, but collectively. And I have a definition of it as culture being this complex web of seen and unseen patterns of thinking, behaving, interacting, feeling, and it's this relationship between the seen and unseen. And I know that you dive into the unseen and reweave patterns, and you've probably never thought about it before as you've been shifting culture, but that's what you've been doing, isn't it?
Yeah, I really hadn't. And when Looby said it earlier, I was just like, hang on a minute, I've got to listen and think about this for quite a while, because it's really true. It's really, it's exactly what shamanic work does. And we think of it sometimes shamanically, we think of above and below, and it's literally that. The below being either, the below being your subconscious, and the above being the physical stuff out in the world. And by altering one, you alter the other. So maybe for some of us, we're better at the practical, physical out here bits. So you can change things up here in your life or in your thought processes, whatever it is. Or maybe for some of us, that's not the place that you start. Maybe for some people, it's the beneath bits. Maybe it's the energy or the subconscious bits that you start with. But either way, whichever you change, the above or the below, they will alter the other and help your whole culture.
And then it's the personal ripples out into the collective, doesn't it? And so what we're doing on the personal level with our own personal culture, whatever terminology you like to use around that, it ripples into the collective. Do you do any work specifically then on the collective moving into the personal, or do you more go from personal into collective?
I mostly work personal into collective, but some of the women that I work with will be working the other way. So they will be working on collective rippling in. But yeah, I just love what you say about that, about the ripples out, because that is, and I didn't necessarily know that's what I was doing when I started, but now that I'm seeing with our year-long work, that is what each woman that joins us in those groups is doing. She is working with her to help her inner processes. And by shifting and changing any problems and healing bits for herself there, she then helps heal her children and her family. And not as, just to pause there, not as I've got all this burden to carry, or I have to do all of this. But it just happens that you do it for you, and then it literally ripples out, doesn't it? And whether it's your children, your family, or whether it's the whole world. And again, that can seem like a big burden to carry sometimes, but actually it can be the simplest thing that ripples out to the whole world. It could be one thing that you say, one little sentence that you say to one person, but lots of other people hear it and feel that change. It's massive. So I love that about rippling out, because every bit of change you do, every bit of change I do, and then every bit of change that ripples out from the, it's just enormous actually, isn't it?
And that's what we're doing with these encouraging conversations, is we're feeling the encouragement, but we're wanting that to ripple out to you, and so that you feel inspired then to think, who could I have an encouraging conversation with around me? And then we create this global field of encouragement, and I think humanity could end up in a different place with this global field of encouragement.
I think it is ending up in a different place. I think things are massively changing.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Was there another word, Looby? What's the...
Well,
yeah. Well, have you got anything to say before we go
well,
on to
I was
that
thinking
last
that we've got this manifestation, and so what I'm manifesting at the moment is the card deck, which we gave you a quick skim round, but I was wondering if you wanted to ask a question of the cards, because we talked about tapping into the intuition, and let's go for the question, and then we'll talk more about intuition afterwards. But what question would you like to ask the cards?
Okay, so one of the things I often ask an oracle deck, but felt really important today, didn't it, was what am I missing? I feel like maybe I'm missing something. Okay, I've seen one with pieces on it, so let's see. This one says work to completion. Choose scale of completion, chunk tasks, and celebrate achievements. You can see it's got lots of little pieces on it, like jigsaw pieces. Thanks, Looby. Work to completion. I'm going to make notes of that now.
Yes. What does that resonate with you then? So you have the question, what's missing at the moment, and then this card, work to completion. So
this is very much like. When I've got a lot going on at the moment, lots of projects and lots of things happening, and this is just this sort of pulling me back to centre of, there are these 4 things that I could be jumping between to fill or to dream up more of or to create, but actually what I need to do is really focus on one of them and follow it through completely to completion. So choose scale of completion. I feel like that's got more and that needs to sit for a bit longer, because I think there's lots in that for me. Choose scale. Yeah, because sometimes we think that, well, where is the completion of something? It's like it's too much to complete. So where is that point of that's a milestone that I can feel happy with, that I've reached that point, and then move on to another scale. And that second point shows us that, doesn't it? It says chunk tasks. So these are the chunks or the bullet points for that bit to be done, and then celebrate that. Yes, really celebrate that. And I've been thinking about celebrating a lot recently with manifestation, because I can be very quick to go, okay, dream and strive and create, and then when you achieve it, I can go, okay, that's a great moment, but on to the next thing. What does celebrating look like to you sometimes? Have you got different ways of doing it? Sometimes it can be as simple as I'm gonna, not at this season, but I'm gonna have a nap in the sunshine. I'm just gonna have that pause, or I'm going to do something indulgent like stay up all night reading a book, or something that feels off the list. Nice. I think that celebration is it's moving off whatever the list is, whatever the list looks like, and to just
have some timeless time as well. I must admit I could do with more of that celebrating achievements, and there is a bit sense of like, okay, next.
Maybe we could do that for each other. We've
Some
talked about that a bit
accountability.
recently,
Yeah.
haven't we? The accountability for each other. So maybe next time you celebrate something, let me know how you're celebrating it, and I'll do the same. Because actually that especially is a real joy sharer.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And that is part of the shadow, I think, actually, of like that. Are we allowed to celebrate?
Yeah.
You know, well, maybe you're not allowed to celebrate because look, your job list isn't finished yet. You know, and that that we've inherited that cultural conditioning of how we celebrate, when we're allowed to celebrate, what that celebration looks like, and maybe some unhealthy ways as well of like, okay, celebration means going out and getting wildly
Really
drunk.
Yeah.
That's
and the other thing this is bringing up for me as well is celebrating other women.
right.
So rather than us being in competition, of us genuinely celebrating, this is something that Looby brings massively into my life, is just really celebrating my wins, so that we can do that for each other, because I love celebrating other people's wins. I love it, and I've never been competitive in that way, even before I started doing my own work and healing me. So I think that would be really fun.
But that is one of the cultural things, is that competition of like, whoa, hold on, you did that quicker than me. Ruth, you're getting in your celebration before me. Oh no, I'm behind. No, she did. No, you know, and all of those stories.
Is somebody getting big-headed because they're celebrating something? Like, oh.
Yeah, like, oh, I did this. It's,
is that too much celebration?
Right, where are the parameters of celebration and how? And so there's a big cultural story around celebration as well. Yeah. Well, I'm going to celebrate the card deck when
I think I might dance for it tonight. I might dance for your
celebration.
I think dancing is going to be one of my celebrations, and I think, as you said, as it gets warmer, swimming as well is going to be another celebration.
Yeah, well, it's funny because you've got ecstatic dance on the same night that I finished the Kickstarter. I was like, I don't know if I can, but maybe I'll find a way to bring those two things together and come and celebrate here.
Wow.
There you go. If I've reached the target before then, I can come and dance.
Oh my God, that's really amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
I've been watching those two things on the calendar and how they fit together. But going back to intuition, I'd love you to share a bit about what that means to you. Like you said, you tap into your intuition before pulling a card, and I mean, I know that some of my listeners who are more into permaculture design are maybe thinking more pragmatically about these design tools and their thinking tools of this, but actually the cards also have this intuitive level, and share with us how we can use them on.
And I work both ways, but obviously shamanic work is very much of that space, of intuitive space, and intuition and the intuitive to me is very much it should be in balance with our logical rationalness. It's not disregarding one or the other, and I think when it becomes a problem is when we do disregard one of them, because we all have intuition, and if we push it to one side and say, oh well, that's nonsense, we're missing a massive part of our wisdom and our innate knowledge within us. And the phrase that I tend to use when we begin working with intuition is just hear what you hear. And what that tends to mean is, you know, if you're listening to this, for example, instead of sitting there with a notebook and taking notes on every single thing that you're hearing, is you'll hear the chunk of conversation that you're meant to remember, or that's really helpful for you in your life right now. And I think it does a number of things when you think, hear what you hear. For me, it takes off a lot of weight off the nervous system. So it stops me from panicking and thinking, I've got to do all of these things. I've got to remember all of these things. And it actually brings out the really beautiful bit, the bit that is most important for me in my life right now, and then helps those ripple effects out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then so how do you take that forward into picking a card?
Yeah. So you just shift it visually. Or I might even close my eyes and just move my hand around, and it's a feeling for me. So all of us have different intuition. We might have a combination of it. We might hear things like hear what you hear. You might hear something much louder, much more clearly, or cognitively hear it. Or you might be very visual, and I might look around these beautiful cards and be really drawn to a certain pattern or shape or colour and not be able to see any of the others, just be like, I can't stop looking at that one or a couple of them. Or maybe you're working really feeling wise, and you get maybe a big strong feeling when you look at one or when you pick one up. And it's, for me, intuition, when we're starting to work with that, is about not ignoring that. And I do find that a lot of people that have been trying to ignore their intuition might be really struggling in certain ways, because it kind of builds up. You're ignoring a big part of you.
So when you were saying that, I suddenly had this flash of intuition that actually the cards will also help people get in touch with their intuition, which I hadn't really thought of it in that way before, that it will work that way, that it actually, when you're using the cards, you'll become more and more finely in tune with, like, oh, why do I want to stop just there when they're all, looking, when I can't even see them, but there's something that's calling me to that card in this moment. And so they'll help people to acknowledge that sense, whether it comes up in a feeling or something visually, or just a moment of just a pause, isn't it? Sometimes when I'm scanning the cards, and it's just oh, I don't know if there's just a pause there that's making me go, this one.
And it's funny because you've just said that, and I've just gone, well, surely cards are all about intuition. Because if I was to create a card deck, I would be creating it for intuitive purposes.
Yeah.
And so we're coming to the same thing, just from these two different places, and both of those are a really massive part of what this is about. What are they called? What are they going to be called?
Well, they're the Cultural Emergence card deck. Yeah. This is what they are, and they're being able to use them so that collectively as well. And so maybe they also have a help the group gain their kind of collective intuition as well, which will be interesting to see how that works. And that's another new thought too from that, of building the collective group wisdom and collective intuition. Brilliant.
So the last word here is community.
Yes.
Which we've already talked a lot about, really, haven't we? Do you feel like you've got, I feel like you have, but do you feel like you've got quite a big community around you? Are there different communities that you think about and feel with and work with? Yeah,
definitely. I do feel like there's many different communities, and one of the visions actually for Cultural Emergence is that it helps, it's like mycelium connecting with different communities. So it might connect as a visual language, as tools, as words and phrases, as hopes and practical tools, and all of this. It can be mycelium between different communities. So between the permaculture community and the shamanic community and the work that reconnects and transition, and all these different communities around the world that are working for change, working for cultural change in many different ways, that it can be tools that connect, and mycelium, that this shared language and understanding and vision that comes forth. So that's the big vision, and there's global community is forming around that vision, around the tools, because they're seeing, oh, this is really potent and engaging, and so that's the other layer of manifestation with this card deck, with the Kickstarter, is this kind of bringing lots of momentum into that community, and lots of people in that will be using then the same tools that then have this visual shared understanding. And just this card has been calling me actually, which is use the intelligence of cooperating hearts, aim for the good of the whole, access more of yourself, and tap into a deeper level of information, which is what we've been talking about here, and then the community aspect of that as well.
That's so gorgeous.
Yeah. So yes, lots of different communities, and I know you work with women's circles, and that's the other thing that I do with the Mother Nature Project is women's circles as well. Because tell us about the power of the circle.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's just made me think of something that came up this week about before I started working in women's circles. I don't think I had any female friends. I would absolutely balk at the idea of sitting in a circle or a group of any women, but especially anyone that was even vaguely in their power or confident or comfortable with themselves. And that is all that I do now. And the power of sitting with women who are wanting to do this work and wanting to be open-hearted and wanting change, it changed everything for me. Absolutely everything in my life for the better, completely. And now I watch it with the women that I work with, in either whether that's like a drop-in monthly women's circle, or whether that's a women's circle that's closed, that we sit in the same group of women once a month, once each moon, or whether that's a year-long group, you know, which is also a closed circle but doing lots of deeper work together. And it's I don't even have the words for the depth of change that gives. It shows you a taught and embodied trust that in other peoples, in other women, but then also, like you say about the mycelium, that then spreads out into your life and into the world. Because if you've found a trust, if you've found and felt trust with other people, let alone all the other many things that happens in a women's circle, but once you found it in that space, you can then take that out. Well, you will. You don't have to think about doing it. It goes with you out into the world, doesn't it? Into your workplace, into your permaculture work, into your relationships, everywhere. You'll just take it with you. It's for me, and probably for you as well, it's the place that change happens, I think.
Yeah, that's what I find, and why I do courses as well, in-person courses, but also online. It all can work as well. You still have that field of encouragement and change and transformation. It's particularly potent when it's in person, and you're there and you're witnessing each other, and you're inviting change, and you're supporting each other, and that encouragement and that questioning and that challenging as well. So it's the challenging can knock off the sharp edges, and that learning new tools, and all of that together is just so potent, isn't it?
Yeah,
and lifelong as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Wow, well we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? And I'm sure many of you will be excited to discover more of our work, so we'll put links in the comments. And should we say our websites, just in case people find this where they don't have the links?
Yeah, so I'm ruthcato.com, and there are some online courses coming up soon as well if you're further away, but I'm based near Looby in the Shropshire-Herefordshire border if you're nearby.
Yeah, and you can find all my work and courses and online offerings and links to the Kickstarter and the card deck and books and all sorts on cultural-emergence.com. So cultural-emergence.com, and you can find out more about us there. But yeah, I wonder if you've got any last thoughts.
Yeah, let's see what this says, because I've just been looking at this. It says, use emergence to support emergence. Answers are resolved as, is that stories yes. Unfold. Do what can be done now. Emergent properties provide springboards, and ask questions that bring more questions. Like that, ask questions that bring more questions.
And this is the power and the magic and the hope, isn't it? That like just this one here which says like, do what can be done now. And we can often be thinking about how impossible something will be in the future, but we don't need to worry about it. It's like that, we don't need to worry about decorating the cake until we've made the cake.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the transformation and the manifestation process, isn't it? Of just like, let's go back to what we can do in this moment, what steps can we take now, and then get to the next bit when we get to the next bit, rather than trying to work out this impossible conundrum in the future without having laid the groundwork to get there. So that's, yeah, that's a really good lesson.